The chamber was built to inspire fear. 12,000 seats rose in concentric rings toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Bioluminescent panels cast pale blue light across faces that belonged to no world humanity had ever imagined. Insectoid creatures with mandibles clicking in agitation. Floating gas beings contained in magnetic fields. Reptilian giants whose scales shimmered with colors that had no names in any human language dot at the center of this vast amphitheater, standing on a platform no wider than a dining table. 3 humans waited. Ambassador David Reyes kept his hands clasped behind his back, hiding the slight tremor in his fingers. Beside him, General Amara Obi maintained the rigid posture that had carried her through 30 years of military service. The third member of their delegation, Dr. Felix Hartman, clutched a data pad against his chest and tried very hard not to look up above them. The Supreme Tribunal descended from the darkness. 5 beings of impossible age, their bodies preserved by technologies that predated human civilization by millions of years. The central figure, a Voranthi elder, whose transparent flesh revealed the slow pulse of multiple organs, spoke without moving its mouth. The words pressed directly into every mind present. Species classification 7291. Planetary origin, Sol 3. Locally designated Earth. You have been summoned to answer for unprecedented violations of galactic law. A murmur swept through the assembled delegates. David had spent 3 months learning to read alien body language, and what he saw now was not curiosity. It was hunger, anticipation, the audience at an execution. 17 days ago, the Voranthi continued, you destroyed the combined harvest fleet of the Kethrani Dominion. 412 million vessels. Crews numbering in the trillions. The greatest military force assembled in this sector's recorded history. The Kethrani delegation erupted. Their representative, a towering creature armored in chitinous plates, rose from its seat and released a sound like metal grinding against stone. The translation systems rendered it as screaming grief and bottomless rage. My broodkin, the Kethrani shrieked. Generations of warriors, reduced to scattered atoms by creatures who still poison their own atmosphere. They must burn. Their world must be rendered to dust and their genetic material erased from existence. David stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Your fleet came to harvest us. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. We intercepted your communications, David continued. We know exactly what a harvest fleet does. You are not coming to negotiate. You are coming to render our planet, to process 8 billion human beings into biological resources for your empire. The Kethrani made a dismissive gesture with several limbs. You are prey species. You were designated as such before your ancestors learned to stack stones. The compact clearly states that all registered biological resources are the legal property of their assigned harvesters. We never signed any compact. Your consent was not required. David nodded slowly. Then neither was ours. When we defended ourselves, the chamber erupted again. Dozens of species shouted accusations and demands. The Supreme Tribunal allowed the chaos to build for precisely 30 seconds before the Voranthi elder raised one withered limb. Instant silence returned. The legality of your actions is not in question, the elder said. All species have the theoretical right to self-defense. What concerns this tribunal is how you achieve this defense. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing tactical footage of the battle. David forced himself to watch what he had only read about in reports. The Kethrani fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Hundreds of millions of ships arranged in geometric patterns that spoke of absolute confidence. They advanced toward Earth with the casual precision of farmers, approaching a field ready for harvest. Then the footage flickered. Static consumed the image. When it cleared, the fleet was gone. Not retreating, not scattered, simply absent. Where 400 million ships had been, there was only expanding clouds of energy that the universe's best scientists could not explain. 17 minutes. Start to finish. What weapon did you use? The Voranthi demanded. David glanced at General Obi. She gave a slight nod. We call it the Prometheus Array, David said. Beyond that, we are not prepared to discuss technical specifications. The chamber exploded into chaos again. This time, the tribunal let it continue longer. David used the time to study the reactions of the various delegations. Most showed fear. Some showed calculation. A few, tucked into the upper rows where the less powerful species were assigned, showed something else entirely. Hope. Dr. Harkman leaned close and whispered, the Drelethi delegate. Third row from the top, near the left support column. She has been trying to make eye contact with you for the past several minutes. David did not look. What species are they? Small empire. 12 worlds. They have been subject to Kethrani harvesting quotas for the past 8,000 years. Interesting. The Voranthi Elder finally restored order. This tribunal will now deliberate your fate. You are permitted a final statement before sentencing begins. David straightened his shoulders. He had prepared for this moment for 3 months, knowing everything depended on the next few minutes. Distinguished members of the tribunal, honored delegates, I understand that humanity's actions have disrupted the established order of your civilization. I understand that many of you see us as a threat to stability, to tradition, to the way things have always been. He paused, letting the translation systems carry his words to every corner of the chamber. But I want you to consider something. You built your galactic society on a simple principle. The strong consume the weak. For millions of years, this worked because the strong always remained strong, and the weak had no choice but to accept their fate. David reached into his pocket and produced a small device. It looked like nothing special. A metal cylinder no larger than his thumb. This is a dead man's switch. It is connected to the Prometheus Array through quantum entanglement. If my vital signs cease, if this device is removed from my person by force, or if any hostile action is taken against Earth in the next 72 hours, the array will activate automatically. The silence that followed was different from before. It was the silence of predators, realizing they were standing in a trap. We did not come here to beg for mercy, David said. We came here to deliver a message. The rules have changed. Humanity is not prey. We are not resources. We are not a species that will quietly accept extinction because it is convenient for the powerful. He looked directly at the Voranthi Elder. We are willing to negotiate. We are willing to find a place in your galactic community. But that place will be as equals, not as livestock awaiting slaughter. General Obi stepped forward. Her voice carried the weight of a woman who had commanded armies. Our scientists estimate that the Prometheus Array, at full activation, could sterilize approximately 30% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. We have no desire to use this capability, but we will not be threatened into helplessness. The Kethrani representative was trembling with rage. You would destroy billions of innocent lives? Obi turned to face the creature. You were coming to destroy 8 billion innocent lives. Our lives, our children, our entire species. And you call yourselves the civilized ones. She let that hang in the air. We came to this chamber expecting condemnation, she continued. We came expecting threats and demands, and perhaps even an attempt to execute us on the spot. But we also came with something none of you anticipated. She nodded to Dr. Hartman, who began transmitting data from his pad. This is everything we know about the Prometheus Array's theoretical basis. Not the weapon itself, but the principles that make it possible. We are offering this knowledge freely to every species in this chamber. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater. Why would you do this? The Vorin the Elder demanded. David answered. Because we do not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to become the new predators at the top of the food chain. We want something that has never existed in your civilization. He spread his hands. We want allies, partners, friends among the stars. And we believe that the only way to build such relationships is through mutual respect and shared strength. The Drelethi delegate was standing now. So were representatives from a dozen other small species. They were not shouting accusations. They were listening. The strong have ruled through fear for millions of years, David said. We are offering a different path. One where strength is used to protect rather than dominate. One where every species has the right to exist without terror. He looked at the tribunal, at the ancient beings who had maintained the old order for eons. You can reject this offer. You can attempt to destroy Earth. Maybe you will succeed. But even if you do, you will pay a price that will echo through history. And you will prove to every watching species that the powerful care nothing for justice. He stepped back. Or you can choose differently. You can be the generation that ends the cycle of predation. The choice is yours. The Vorin the Elder stared at David for a long moment. Its multiple hearts pulsed visibly beneath translucent flesh. This tribunal will recess for deliberation. The human delegation will be escorted to holding chambers until a decision is reached. As guards moved to escort them away, David caught the eye of the Drelethi delegate. She made a subtle gesture with her manipulator limbs. He did not know what it meant in her culture, but he recognized the emotion behind it. It was gratitude. The chamber doors closed behind them. General Obi let out a long breath. Do you think they believed it? Hartman asked. David allowed himself a small smile. They believe we are dangerous. They believe we are unpredictable. And most importantly, they believe we are willing to die rather than submit. He touched the cylinder in his pocket. Whether they believe we are telling the truth about our intentions, that remains to be seen. In the darkness between stars, the Prometheus array waited. Its true capabilities were known only to a handful of humans. The claims David had made in the chamber were partially true. But the full truth was something far more significant. And it was something the galaxy would learn soon enough. 3 days passed in the holding chambers beneath the council station. 3 days of silence and waiting and the slow crawl of time that made every hour feel like a week. David paced the small room assigned to him. The walls were seamless metal that glowed with soft light. The furniture had been grown rather than built, organic shapes that adjusted to human anatomy with unsettling accuracy. Everything was designed to remind him that humanity was small, primitive, and utterly dependent on the mercy of ancient civilizations. The door dissolved. General Obi stepped through, her face grim. Behind her came Dr. Hartman, clutching his datapad like a lifeline. They have reached a decision, Obi said. We are being summoned back to the chamber. David straightened his uniform. Do we know what they decided? No, but I have been monitoring communications traffic on the station. She paused. There has been significant movement among the smaller delegations. Private meetings. Encrypted transmissions. Plotting against us? Possibly. Or possibly something else entirely. The Drelethi ambassador requested a meeting with you specifically. I told them it was impossible while we were confined. They walked through corridors that curved in ways that hurt human eyes. Other species passed them, some hostile, some curious, some carefully neutral. Word had spread about humanity's ultimatum. David could feel the weight of attention from creatures who had never considered his species worth noticing. The chamber was different when they returned. The seats were still filled. The tribunal still loomed above, but the atmosphere had shifted. The predatory anticipation was gone, replaced by something more complex: uncertainty, division, fear. The Voranth the Elder spoke without preamble. The Supreme Tribunal has deliberated. We have reviewed evidence, consulted historical records, and considered the implications of your actions for galactic stability. David waited. The destruction of the Kethrani Harvest Fleet was technically an act of self-defense. Your species was not informed of galactic law, and therefore cannot be held accountable for violating statutes you did not know existed. A rustle of surprise moved through the chamber. The Kethrani delegation began making sounds of outrage, but the Voranthi silenced them with a gesture. However, the Elder continued, your subsequent actions present a more serious concern. The development of weapons capable of mass extinction-level destruction violates the first principle of the compact. No species may possess armaments that threaten the fundamental stability of galactic civilization. David felt his stomach tighten. Therefore, the tribunal demands the immediate surrender and dismantling of the Prometheus array. Earth will be placed under protective observation for a period of no less than 10,000 standard years. Your species will be permitted to exist, but you will not be permitted to expand beyond your home system. These terms are non-negotiable. General Obi's voice cut through the chamber. And if we refuse? The Voranthi's many eyes focused on her. Then the combined fleets of the Council will be dispatched to enforce compliance. We have calculated that even with your weapons, you cannot defeat the unified military power of 800 civilizations. Silence stretched. David stepped forward. May I speak? You may. You say you have calculated our defeat. You say that your combined fleets can overwhelm us. He paused. You are probably correct. We are one world against a galaxy. Even the Prometheus array has limits. He reached into his pocket and removed the small cylinder. But before you make this decision final, there is something you should know. Something I did not reveal in our previous session. He turned to face not the tribunal, but the assembled delegates. Thousands of alien faces watched him. When the Kethrani fleet entered our system, they were broadcasting openly. They did not bother with encryption because they did not consider us capable of intercepting their communications. They discussed their plans in detail. Which continents to harvest first, how to process our population most efficiently, whether certain genetic lines might be worth preserving for breeding stock. His voice hardened. But they also discussed other things. They talked about quotas, about the other species they have harvested over the millennia, about the agreements they have with the Council that give them exclusive rights to biological resources in 17 sectors. The Drelethi delegate was standing again. So were others. We recorded everything, David continued. We know which species have been designated as resources. We know which empires profit from harvesting them. We know the true nature of the compact that you claim represents law and justice. He looked at the Voranth the Elder. It is not law. It is organized predation. A system designed to ensure that the powerful never face consequences for consuming the weak. The chamber erupted. This time, the chaos was not unified. Species that had sat quietly for millennia were shouting at their neighbors. Ancient alliances were cracking. The careful balance of power that had sustained the Council for ages was trembling. The Voranth the Elder's mental voice cut through the noise. You would destabilize galactic civilization to save your own species? No, David said. I would destabilize a system built on suffering, on slavery, on the casual consumption of sapient beings. If that is what your civilization represents, then perhaps it deserves to fall. General Obi stepped up beside him. We came here hoping for justice. We came hoping that somewhere in this vast galaxy there existed principles higher than raw power. What we found instead was a machine designed to crush hope wherever it emerged. She looked at the smaller delegations. the species who had been victims for longer than humanity had existed. But we also found something else. We found that we are not alone. There are others who have suffered under this system. Others who have dreamed of something better. Others who have been waiting for someone to stand up and say what we are saying now. Dr. Hartman transmitted another data burst. "This is everything we recorded from the Kathrani transmissions," David said. "It is being broadcast to every delegation in this chamber and to every communications network we can access. By the time this session ends, trillions of beings across the galaxy will know the truth about how this council operates." The Kathrani representative was screaming threats. Several other predator species joined in. But David noticed something else. Many delegations were receiving the data and going very, very quiet. They were reading. They were learning. And they were realizing that they were not alone. The Vorin the Elder rose from its throne. For the first time, its mental voice carried something other than cold authority. There was anger. And beneath the anger, fear. "You have made a grave mistake, human. You think transparency will save you. You think the galaxy will rise up to support your cause. But you do not understand how power works in this civilization." The Elder's thoughts pressed harder against every mind present. The strong have always ruled the weak. This is not injustice. It is nature. The predator does not apologize to its prey. The mighty do not bow to the feeble. Your primitive ideals of fairness and equality have no place in a universe governed by the simple truth of survival. David did not flinch. Maybe you are right. Maybe the strong will always crush the weak. Maybe hope is foolish and resistance is futile. He held up the cylinder. But I would rather die fighting for something better than live accepting something evil. And I am betting that there are others in this chamber who feel the same way. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Drelethi ambassador stepped into the central aisle. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and utterly defiant. "I am Ambassador Thurla of the Drelethi Collective. For 8,000 years, my people have been harvested by the Kathrani under the protection of this council. We have lost billions of lives. We have watched our children taken as livestock. We have begged for justice and received only quotas." She turned to face the tribunal. "Today, I stand with the humans. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Another delegate rose. Then another. Within minutes, over 200 species were standing in solidarity with Earth. The Vorin the Elder watched this with something that might have been shock. "You would throw away everything for this foolish gesture? The Council will not forget this betrayal. You will be punished alongside the humans." Ambassador Thurla's voice was steady. "We have been punished for 8,000 years. At least now we will be punished for standing up rather than bowing down." General Obi leaned close to David. "This is more support than we anticipated. But it is still not enough. The major powers have not moved." David nodded. "Then we need to give them a reason to reconsider." He raised his voice. "Supreme Tribunal, I have one more piece of information to share. Something that may change your calculations significantly." The Vorin the Elder's eyes narrowed. "Speak. When we developed the Prometheus array, we did not create it for nothing. We discovered something on Mars. Ancient technology buried for millions of years. Technology from a species that existed before the Council, before the Compact, before anything currently alive remembers." The chamber went absolutely still. "We believe this species was called the Architects, and we believe they were destroyed by the founders of your civilization because they threatened the predatory order you established." Dr. Hartman pulled up historical records. "We found references in the data we captured. Fragmentary mentions of a great war fought before recorded history. A species that believed in cooperation rather than predation. They were eliminated because their ideals were dangerous to those who wanted power. The Vorinthi Elder's transparent flesh pulsed with agitation. You know nothing of the architects. They are myths. Stories told to frighten primitive species. Then why are you afraid? David asked quietly. Why does the mere mention of their name make your hearts beat faster? He stepped closer to the tribunal platform. We did not just find technology. We found records. Incomplete, damaged, but recoverable. The architects did not die. They hid. They scattered their knowledge across the galaxy and waited for someone to find it. Someone who would use it not for conquest, but for liberation. He spread his hands. We are not claiming to be their successors. We are only one species, and a young one at that. But we found their legacy, and we are willing to share it with anyone who wants to build something better than this. The chamber remained silent. David could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. The accumulated power of ancient civilizations that had ruled through fear for eons. Then, slowly, the Vorinthi Elder settled back onto its throne. This tribunal will recess indefinitely. These matters require further consideration. As the Elder withdrew into the shadows, David caught a glimpse of something in its ancient eyes. It was the look of a predator that had just discovered it. Was not alone at the top of the food chain. And for the first time in millions of years. The rulers of the galaxy did not know what would happen next. The recess lasted 12 days. During that time, the council station transformed from a center of unified authority into a battlefield of competing factions. Corridors that had seen nothing but orderly diplomatic traffic for millennia now buzzed with secret meetings, whispered alliances, and the quiet movement of species that had never dared to speak to each other. David spent most of his time in the quarters assigned to the human delegation, meeting with representatives from the coalition that had formed around Earth. Ambassador Thurla of the Drelethi became their unofficial coordinator. Her 8,000 years of suffering, having given her a network of contacts among the oppressed species that proved invaluable. The major powers are fracturing, she reported during one late session. The Kethrani are demanding immediate military action, but the Vorinthi are hesitant. They fear what you showed them about the architects. General Obi studied the tactical display hovering above the table. They should be afraid. What we found on Mars is only the beginning. Our scientists believe there are other caches hidden throughout the galaxy. Can you find them? Thurla asked. Maybe, with time and resources. Obi's expression was grim. Time we may not have. Dr. Hartman looked up from his datapad. There is something else. I have been analyzing the communications traffic we have intercepted. The major powers are not just debating what to do about us. They are debating what to do about each other. David leaned forward. Explain. The balance of power in this galaxy has been maintained by mutual deterrence. No single empire is strong enough to dominate, so they cooperate to suppress species that might upset the equilibrium. Hartman's fingers danced across the pad. But our revelation about the architects has introduced a new variable. Suddenly, there is a possibility that someone could gain access to technology that would shift the balance permanently. They are not just afraid of us, Obi realized. They are afraid of each other gaining our secrets first. Exactly. The coalition forming around us is making them nervous, but what terrifies them is the idea that one of their rivals might ally with us instead. David absorbed this information. Then we need to accelerate their fears. Make them understand that waiting is more dangerous than acting. Before anyone could respond, an alert chimed. David activated the display and found himself looking at a face he did not recognize. The creature was vaguely humanoid, with smooth gray skin and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. Ambassador Reyes, the being said. I am Prelate Morven of the Salathi Consensus. I request a private meeting. David exchanged glances with his team. The Solathi were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, second only to the Vorinthi. They had remained silent throughout the proceedings, their delegation watching without comment. "I will meet with you," David said carefully. "But not alone. Acceptable. 1 hour. The meditation gardens on level 47. The connection terminated. Thurla's manipulator limbs clicked with agitation. The Solathi do not take sides. They have not intervened in galactic politics for over 1,000,000 years. Then why are they reaching out now?" Obi asked. "Because something has changed," David said. "Something important enough to break 1,000,000 years of neutrality." The meditation gardens were a pocket of engineered nature in the heart of the station. Trees that had never known planetary soil rose toward an artificial sky. Water flowed through channels designed to produce sounds that calmed every species that heard them. Prelate Morven waited beside a pool filled with luminescent organisms. David approached with General Obi at his side, leaving Hartman and Thurla to monitor from a safe distance. "Thank you for coming," Morven said. "I apologize for the secrecy, but what I have to say cannot be overheard." David nodded. "We are listening." The Solathi's galaxy-filled eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. "You spoke of the architects in the chamber. You claim to have found their technology. We did. Then you have found only a fragment. A single thread of a tapestry that once spanned the universe." Morven moved closer. "The Solathi were not always as we are now. Long ago, before the current order was established, we were servants of the architects. We learned from them. We helped them build." David's heart rate increased. "You knew them? We remember them. We preserved what knowledge we could when they fell." Morven's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The official history claims they were destroyed by the founders of the Council. This is only partially true. The architects were defeated, yes, but not eliminated. They scattered themselves across dimensions, hiding in places the Council could not reach." General Obi's hand moved toward her sidearm. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because you are the first species in 5,000,000 years to find their technology and use it for something other than conquest." Morven's expression was unreadable. The architects did not just leave weapons. They left a test. A way of identifying which species might be worthy of inheriting their legacy. David felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "And you think we passed? You destroyed a fleet of 400 million ships. You could have used that power to demand submission from the galaxy. Instead, you came here asking for allies. You offered to share your knowledge freely." Morven paused. "That is not the behavior of predators. That is the behavior of builders. What exactly are you offering?" "Information. The location of other architect caches. The histories that were erased when the current order was established. And something more." Morven reached into a fold of its robe and produced a small crystal. "This contains coordinates. A place where the architects left their most important message. A message intended for whoever passed their test." David took the crystal carefully. "Why now? Why not approach us earlier?" "Because we needed to be certain. The galaxy has seen many species rise and fall. Most who found architect technology became tyrants worse than those they replaced. We watched you carefully, Ambassador. We watched how you treated your delegation, how you responded to threats, how you chose to handle power." The Solathi's eyes seemed to deepen. "You are not perfect. Your species has committed its share of atrocities. But you also possess something rare, a capacity for growth, a willingness to question your own nature. The architects believed this was the most important quality a species could have." General Obi spoke up. "The Council will not let us reach these coordinates. If they learn what you have given us, they will attack with everything they have." "Yes," Morven agreed. "Which is why you must move quickly. The recess will end tomorrow. The tribunal will announce their decision. It will not be in your favor. Line pillars. What is this? Obi asked, the architect's final gift. Morven moved toward the central structure. When they realized defeat was inevitable, they did something unprecedented. They uploaded themselves. Their minds, their memories, their very essences. All preserved in this matrix, waiting for the moment when they might be useful again. Hartman's voice was barely a whisper. They are still alive. All of them. In a sense, they cannot interact with the physical world directly. But they can communicate. They can teach. They can share everything they learned over billions of years of existence. David approached the nearest crystalline pillar. It was warm to the touch, and he felt something stir within it. Recognition. Welcome. Why us? He asked, why humanity? The answer came not from Morven, but from the chamber itself. A voice that was many voices, speaking in harmony. Because you fight. Because you question. Because you looked at a universe that told you to submit or die, and you chose neither. The light in the chamber intensified, and suddenly David could see them. Not physically, but as impressions, presences. Thousands of minds turning their attention toward the small group of humans who had found their way here. We failed, the architect said. We were too gentle, too hesitant, too committed to our principles to survive in a galaxy ruled by violence. But we learned from our failure. We understood that change requires not just ideals but strength. Not just hope but power. One of the crystalline pillars activated, projecting an image into the air. It showed the Prometheus array, the weapon humanity had built from scraps of architect technology. You found our weapons and used them to defend yourselves. This was expected. But then you did something unexpected. You came to the council not as conquerors, but as petitioners. You offered to share your power rather than hoard it. You tried to build alliances rather than empires. The image shifted to show the coalition, the 200 species now fighting across the galaxy. This is what we hoped for. This is what we waited 5 million years to see. Not one species rising to dominate all others, but many species rising together to challenge the old order. David found his voice. What do you want from us? We want you to finish what we started. To build a galaxy where strength serves justice instead of replacing it. To create a civilization where cooperation is rewarded and predation is punished. The light pulsed. We can give you the tools, the knowledge, the power, but we cannot do the work for you. That must come from you and those who choose to stand with you. General Obi stepped forward. The council will not stop. They have already mobilized their fleets. Our coalition is fighting bravely, but they cannot hold forever. We know, and we are prepared to help. The architect's voice took on a harder edge. We were too reluctant to use our full power when we faced destruction. We will not make that mistake again. Around the chamber, the crystalline pillars began to glow brighter. Throughout this galaxy, we left installations, weapons platforms, defense networks, all dormant, waiting for this moment. With your permission, we will activate them. With our permission? David asked. We will not repeat the cycle of tyranny. We will not force our will on the galaxy, even for its own good. The choice must be yours. David looked at his companions. Obi's face was hard with military calculation. Hartman's eyes shone with scientific wonder. Morven stood silent, watching with those impossible galaxy-filled eyes. What happens when we activate these systems? David asked. The council fleets will be neutralized. Not destroyed, unless necessary, but rendered helpless. The war will end, and then the real work begins. The real work? Building something new. Convincing species that have known nothing but predation for millions of years that another way is possible. It will take generations. It will require patience and wisdom and strength. It will be harder than any battle. David was quiet for a long moment. And what happens to you? To the architects? We will do what we have always done. We will teach. We will advise. We will share our knowledge with anyone willing to learn. A warmth entered the collective voice. We have been alone for so long. The chance to work alongside living minds again, to help build something beautiful. It is more than we dared to hope for. David turned to face the central structure. Before I make this decision, I need to understand something. You could have given this power to anyone. You could have chosen a species that was stronger, more advanced, more suited to the task. Why us? The architects were silent for a moment. Then they answered. Because you almost did not exist. Your species faced extinction many times. Ice ages, asteroids, wars, plagues. Each time, you survived not because you were the strongest or the smartest, but because you helped each other. Because you chose cooperation over competition when it mattered most. The light pulsed. The galaxy has forgotten that lesson. The Council species believe that only the strong deserve to survive. They have built their civilization on the bones of countless worlds they deemed unworthy. Images flashed through the chamber. Species harvested. Cultures erased. Billions upon billions of lives consumed to feed the appetites of the powerful. You reminded the galaxy that there is another way. Not through speeches or philosophy, but through action. When the Kathrani came to harvest you, you fought back. When the Council demanded your submission, you offered alliance instead. When given the chance to dominate, you chose to uplift. The architect's voice softened. You are young. You are flawed. You have made terrible mistakes and will make more. But you carry within you the potential for something beautiful. A vision of what sapient life could become when it chooses to grow rather than consume. David felt the weight of a galaxy pressing down on him. The responsibility, the fear, the fragile, desperate hope. He looked at his companions one more time. Obi nodded grimly. Hartman gave a small smile. Even Morven inclined their head in what might have been approval. David turned back to the architects. Do it, he said. Activate the systems. End the war. And help us build something worth living for. The chamber erupted in light. And across the galaxy, ancient machines began to stir. The old order was ending. Something new was about to begin. The war ended in silence. Not the silence of death or defeat, but the silence of weapons that suddenly refused to fire. Of engines that powered down without warning. Of fleets that found themselves drifting helplessly in the void. Between stars, the architect's systems spread through the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Every vessel belonging to the Council powers was identified, tagged, and disabled. Not destroyed. The architects had been very clear about that. This was not about revenge or punishment. It was about creating space for something new. David watched the reports come in from the bridge of the Canterbury. System after system reported the same thing. Fighting had stopped. Ships were adrift. Entire armadas hung motionless in space, their crews confused but unharmed. The Kathrani are screaming on every frequency, Hartman reported. They are demanding to know what happened to their weapons. Let them scream, General Obi said. They spent millennia making others scream. A little helplessness might teach them something. David shook his head. No, if we want to build something different, we cannot start with cruelty. Even justified cruelty. He opened a communication channel. His voice would reach every ship in the galaxy, every station, every world, with a receiver capable of catching the signal. This is Ambassador David Reyes of Earth. The war is over. The systems that disabled your weapons are under our control, but they will not be used for conquest. They will not be used for revenge. They are being held in trust for all species until a new order can be established. He paused, gathering his thoughts. For millions of years, the galaxy has been ruled by fear. The strong consumed the weak. The powerful did as they pleased, and the powerless suffered as they must. This system was called civilization. It was called the natural order. It was called inevitable. David's voice hardened. It was a lie. There is nothing natural about organized predation. There is nothing civilized about harvesting sapient beings. There is nothing inevitable about tyranny except the suffering it causes. He looked at the star map, at the thousands of worlds waiting to hear what would happen next. Today, humanity offers the galaxy a choice. We can continue as we were, fighting each other for dominance, consuming everything in our path until nothing is left. Or we can try something different. We can build a civilization based on cooperation rather than predation, where strength is used to protect rather than dominate, where every species has the right to exist without fear of being harvested or enslaved or erased. This will not be easy. It will take generations. It will require species that have been enemies for millennia to learn to work together. It will demand that we all face the darkness in our own histories and commit to something better. David allowed himself a small smile. But humanity has never been intimidated by difficult tasks. We are a stubborn species. We refused to die when nature tried to kill us. We refused to submit when the Kathrani came to harvest us. And we refuse to accept that the galaxy cannot change. To those who wish to join us in building something new, welcome. Your past does not matter. Your species does not matter. Only your willingness to work toward a better future. To those who wish to continue the old ways, you are free to do so. We will not force our vision on anyone. But understand that the systems protecting you from each other will also protect those you would victimize. The era of unchallenged predation is over. He straightened his shoulders. The architects left behind a legacy of hope. Today, we begin the work of honoring that legacy. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, as builders, as partners, as friends. This is humanity's offer to the galaxy. The choice is yours. He closed the channel. For a long moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then General Obi spoke. That was either the most inspiring speech in galactic history or the most naive. Possibly both. David laughed. It felt strange, laughing after everything that had happened. But it also felt right. Probably both. But naive is not the same as wrong. The weeks that followed were chaos. Not the chaos of war, but the chaos of change. Delegations arrived at the architect homeworld from across the galaxy. Species that had been oppressed for millennia came seeking protection and partnership. Others came demanding answers, explanations, guarantees. The Kathrani representative, the same creature that had screamed for humanity's destruction, was escorted to the great chamber where the architects waited. You have crippled us, the Kathrani accused. Our fleet is powerless. Our harvesting operations had ceased. Billions of my kind face starvation without the resources we have always depended on. David faced the towering insectoid without flinching. Your species harvested other sapient beings for food. You consumed trillions of lives to feed your empire. Did you think this could continue forever? It was our right. The strong consume the weak. This is the nature of existence. No, David's voice was flat. It was a choice. One your species made because it was easier than finding another way. Now you face a different choice. Adapt or fade. We will not let you starve, but we will not let you harvest either. The Kathrani's mandibles clicked with agitation. What would you have us do? Learn, change, discover new ways to feed your population that do not require the suffering of others. David gestured toward the chamber around them. The architects have technologies that could transform your agricultural capabilities. They are willing to share this knowledge freely. In exchange for what? In exchange for nothing except a commitment to stop predation. That is all we ask. Not submission, not tribute, just a promise to try something different. The Kathrani was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, some of the anger had drained from its voice. This is not what we expected. We thought you would demand revenge for the fleet we lost. Revenge accomplishes nothing except creating new grievances. We are not interested in punishment. We are interested in building a future where species like yours and species like mine can coexist without fear. The Kathrani studied David with compound eyes that had evolved to identify prey. You are strange. Creatures, humans. You fight like demons when threatened, but you do not seem to enjoy it. We do not. Fighting is sometimes necessary, but it is never desirable. Given the choice, we would rather build than destroy. Another long silence. I must consult with my broodmasters, the Kathrani finally said. But I will convey your offer. Perhaps ... Perhaps there is room for consideration. It was not acceptance. It was not friendship. But it was a beginning. 3 months after the war ended, a new institution was established on the architect homeworld. They called it the Assembly, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Representatives from every species that wished to participate gathered in a great hall designed to accommodate beings of every shape and size. There were no tiers based on power or prestige. No permanent seats for the mighty. Just a vast circle where anyone could speak and everyone would listen. Ambassador Thurla of the Drelethi stood at the center, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. For 8,000 years, my people dreamed of this moment. We dreamed of a day when we would be seen as more than resources to be harvested, when our children would grow up without fear of being taken, when our culture and our history and our lives would have value in the eyes of the galaxy. She turned to face David, who sat among the human delegation. The humans made this possible. They found us when we had given up hope. They stood with us when standing meant death. They offered us not charity, but partnership. Her voice cracked with emotion. Today, the Drelethi are free. Not because we conquered our oppressors, but because we finally found allies willing to help us build something better. This is the future the architects envisioned. This is the legacy humanity has helped us claim. Applause swept through the assembly. Not the polite acknowledgement of diplomatic protocol, but genuine celebration. Species that had spent millennia as victims were finally being heard. David rose to address the gathering. The Drelethi do not owe humanity anything. What we did because it was right. Because no species should have to face tyranny alone. He looked around the hall at the incredible diversity of forms and faces gathered there. The architects believed that sapient life was precious, that cooperation was superior to competition, that the measure of a civilization was not its power but its compassion. He spread his hands. We are gathered here today to test that belief, to see if species that have been enemies for millions of years can learn to work together, to see if we can build something our descendants will be proud of. It will not be easy. There will be conflicts and setbacks and moments when the old ways seem simpler. But I believe that what we build here will last. Not because we are forcing it on anyone, but because enough of us want it badly enough to make it work. He smiled. Humanity came to the stars, hoping to find friends. For a while, it seemed like we would find only enemies. But today, looking around this hall, I see something better. I see the beginning of a family. A strange, complicated, argumentative family of countless species with nothing in common except a shared belief that the future can be better than the past. That is worth fighting for. That is worth building for. That is worth living for. The Assembly voted to establish the new compact that day. Not a system of laws imposed by the powerful, but a framework of agreements negotiated by equals. Protection for the vulnerable. Opportunity for the ambitious. Justice for those who had never known it. It would take generations to fully implement. There would be setbacks and failures, and moments of despair. But the foundation had been laid. 1 year after the war ended, David stood on the surface of Earth for the first time since the crisis began. The sky was familiar, blue and clear, but it felt different somehow. The stars that would appear at nightfall were no longer points of light in an empty void. They were homes, neighbors, friends. General Obi stood beside him, looking up at the same sky. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "The compact? The assembly? The peace?" David considered the question. "I do not know. Nothing lasts forever. Eventually, new conflicts will arise. New challenges will emerge. Species we have never met will ask us to prove that our ideals are more than words." He turned to face her. "But I know this. Whatever happens, we tried. We found ourselves facing a universe that told us to submit or die, and we chose neither. We chose to fight for something worth having. Even if it all falls apart tomorrow, that moment mattered." Obi nodded slowly. The architects waited 5 million years for someone to carry their legacy forward. I hope we do not disappoint them. We will disappoint them. We will make mistakes. We will fall short of our ideals more times than we can count. David smiled. But we will also surprise them, because that is what humans do. We fail and we learn, and we keep trying until we get it right. He looked up at the sky one more time. Somewhere out there, the architects are watching. They have seen 1 million species rise and fall. They have watched the strong consume the weak for longer than Earth has existed. But today, they are seeing something new. Today, they are seeing hope. In the depths of the architect homeworld, in the chamber where millions of ancient minds waited and watched, something stirred. Not concern or calculation, but something warmer. Something that had been absent from their existence for 5 million years. The humans were imperfect. They were young and foolish, and prone to mistakes that older species had learned to avoid. But they carried within them a spark that the architects recognized. It was the same spark that had driven the architects themselves long ago. The belief that sapient life was precious. The conviction that cooperation was superior to predation. The stubborn refusal to accept that the universe had to be cruel. The architects had failed to protect that spark when it mattered most. They had been too gentle, too hesitant, too committed to their principles to survive in a galaxy ruled by violence. But they had also been wise enough to leave something behind. A legacy hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone worthy to find it. The humans had found it. And more importantly, they had understood it. The architects settled deeper into their crystalline slumber, content for the first time in millions of years. The work was not finished. It might never be finished. But it had finally begun again. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a new light was spreading. It was the light of hope. It was the light of change. It was the light of a galaxy, finally learning to become something better than it had been. And at the heart of it all, small and fragile, but burning with stubborn determination, were the humans of Earth, the species that had looked up at the stars and decided to make them home, the species that had faced extinction and chosen to fight back, the species that had been given the power to destroy and chosen to build. Instead, they were not perfect. They would never be perfect. But they were trying, and sometimes trying was enough. But I know this. Whatever happens, we tried. We found ourselves facing a universe that told us to submit or die, and we chose neither. We chose to fight for something worth having. Even if it all falls apart tomorrow, that moment mattered. Obi nodded slowly. The architects waited 5 million years for someone to carry their legacy forward. I hope we do not disappoint them. We will disappoint them. We will make mistakes. We will fall short of our ideals more times than we can count. David smiled. But we will also surprise them. Because that is what humans do. We fail and we learn, and we keep trying until we get it right. He looked up at the sky one more time. Somewhere out there, the architects are watching. They have seen 1 million species rise and fall. They have watched the strong consume the weak for longer than Earth has existed. But today, they are seeing something new. Today, they are seeing hope. In the depths of the architect homeworld, in the chamber where millions of ancient minds waited and watched, something stirred. Not concern or calculation, but something warmer. Something that had been absent from their existence for 5 million years. The humans were imperfect. They were young and foolish, and prone to mistakes that older species had learned to avoid. But they carried within them a spark that the architects recognized. It was the same spark that had driven the architects themselves long ago. The belief that sapient life was precious. The conviction that cooperation was superior to predation. The stubborn refusal to accept that the universe had to be cruel. The architects had failed to protect that spark when it mattered most. They had been too gentle, too hesitant, too committed to their principles to survive in a galaxy ruled by violence. But they had also been wise enough to leave something behind. A legacy hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone worthy to find it. The humans had found it. And more importantly, they had understood it. The architects settled deeper into their crystalline slumber, content for the first time in millions of years. The work was not finished. It might never be finished. But it had finally begun again, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a new light was spreading. It was the light of hope. It was the light of change. It was the light of a galaxy, finally learning to become something better than it had been. And at the heart of it all, small and fragile, but burning with stubborn determination, were the humans of Earth, the species that had looked up at the stars and decided to make them home, the species that had faced extinction and chosen to fight back, the species that had been given the power to destroy and chosen to build. Instead, they were not perfect. They would never be perfect. But they were trying, and sometimes trying was enough.